everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. My goal here is to help us all connect, inspire, and create. If this is your first time joining us, we do this every week here on Zoom with a guest photographer that shares their expertise, creativity, and inspiration to help you improve your photography experience. You can find a list of upcoming presentations on my website at lindanickell.com. And if you miss a session, you can always find them linked to my YouTube channel. Erin Randall is hanging out and pushing all the buttons to keep things running smoothly for us. You can connect with her at admiralyoracoaching.com. Say hello, Miss Erin. Where'd she go?
Say hello, but only if I get to tell another joke.
But you've already told a joke.
But I have another one.
Okay, Erin has been gone from Texas for about 3 months. So as a welcome home, welcome back to Texas gift from me to you. Let's hear your stupid joke.
Not stupid. It's scientific.
Oh, God. All right, go for it.
So what's the problem with atoms? Why do they lie? They make up everything.
All right, with that, my guest tonight is Gary Mullins. Also known as Feather Lighting Studios on Instagram. Gary is a wildlife photographer based in Colorado with his intimate portraits of large mammals like the grizzly bear, the majesty of the American eagle, to the tiniest of critters, the mountain-dwelling pika. Gary's images are moments that take us straight into his subjects, environments, and his landscapes from Colorado to the Pacific Northwest will entice you to plan your own wildlife adventure. In tonight's presentation, The Power of Practice in Wildlife Photography, Gary will share his photographic journey and the beautiful wildlife experiences and adventures that he's had over the last year and a half. From practicing photography in his backyard to his local parks and wildlife preserves, Gary's captured images that he could only imagine. The practice time he has put in the field has enabled him to learn how to use his equipment, become familiar with the habitats he's visiting, and to respect the subjects he photographs. I want to welcome you, Gary, to the Happiness Hour. Thank you for saying yes to my invitation. And did you ever think that meeting 3 strangers from Texas, you would end up in your van doing a Zoom presentation?
Yeah, no idea.
Life is funny that way, isn't it? You just never know who you're going to meet. And let this be a warning to people. When you meet me, I tuck away fun facts about you. And when I started thinking about who I wanted to invite to do a wildlife presentation, you were high on my list. And so I'm very grateful for you taking the chance to come on and share your work and talk to a bunch of strangers. And so with that, I'm going to ask you, maybe introduce yourself, because I just skimmed over. Gary doesn't have a website yet. He is working on it. And if I cross my fingers and make a wish, I hope that he at some point decides to lead wildlife photo tours or guides, because he's really, really good and he knows where to find these animals and he understands them. So with that, Gary, introduce yourself, fill in the blanks that I might have skimmed over.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Linda. I'm very humbled and honored to be on here. Who would have known 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago, this would be materializing. So I just really appreciate your kind words and invitation. So yeah, I'm Gary Mullins. I actually grew up in East Tennessee near the Smoky Mountain National Park, and my grandmother was a large part of the national park hiking clubs and Mount LeConte and that community. So that's where I gained my appreciation for nature. And then, fast forward into college, I had an opportunity to live and work in Yellowstone the year after my sophomore year in college. Had never really picked up a camera before at all, and got a point and shoot camera, and really just found that I loved photography, capturing those moments. I remember sending rolls of film home to my mom, and she would get them developed and send them back. And it was, like Christmas every week when I got those images back. Got home from college and entered a contest with a landscape photo from a point and shoot, and got third. And so that kind of was the encouragement, confidence to kind of keep pursuing it. So when I graduated college, I went back out for another summer. By that time, I had gotten a good DSLR or SLR at that time, and kind of jumped back in. So back in the early 2000s, late 1990s and early 2000s, I actually did quite a bit of film photography, mostly landscape, maybe some environmental portraits of animals, did some art shows. And then once it became digital, I just lost interest. I was a purist. And so I kind of put it away. Fast forward again, over the next 10 to 15 years, I actually got a DSLR kit. And it was just a kit with kit lenses, just something to have for traveling. We drove to Alaska, my wife and I did a while back, and used that. Wasn't really focused on photography, but had an opportunity to take some, decent images. And then in 2018, I was going through a big life shift. I've been working in ministry for 20 years. And so I decided to not do that anymore. And I immediately gained an opportunity to go to Africa to do some ministry over there, just a short-term ministry trip. And I took my camera with me. Not sure what I would materialize, and it got stolen on the trip, which really stinks. And there's some lessons learned, and it was a huge blessing. So I got back home and realized how much I miss photography, and I started building a kit. At that point, still focusing on landscape photography. The Bosque trip you referenced earlier in December of 2019 was my first ever wildlife trip. I had just gotten a nice lens for Christmas. It was a surprise. And so that was my first trip. So I've only been doing wildlife just a little over 2 years. Fortunately, I live in Colorado, and there are a lot of things accessible. And I find that wildlife can be more accessible than landscape, because I can kind of have a little more influence on my environment and wildlife than I can capturing cool clouds or sunsets or things like that. So so for the last 2 years, I've really been working on a portfolio to get my portfolio built up. Done a couple art shows, with the COVID year, I pulled back on those. And this summer I continued to not do those. I wasn't sure about the risk in that financially. And so starting in 2022, that's kind of the pursuit. And it's interesting you say to lead wildlife tours. That is definitely something that's very close to my heart. Maybe we'll mention this earlier, but I do know that my why I do this is to protect, teach, and inspire. And so that all fits really well with doing some kind of tour and or workshop to help other people experience what I've gotten the privilege to experience. So that's the fill in the gaps, I guess.
It's a wonderful, nice way to summarize it. And it's a great introduction to you and your work. And in the last, it's just 2 years that you've been doing this. I'm blown away. I tell you that. When you make a post, I will leave those comments, because oftentimes I'm kind of fascinated by wildlife. It's still one of those challenges that I have not. I work at it really hard. Unfortunately, I don't have opportunities to see bear and bison and moose. That's not something that roams the plains here in Texas. Well, bison do, but to see your photos, it gets me excited, time in Colorado. And we've kind of talked about me coming out there, and I'm going to take you up on that offer. I am going to take you up on that offer. So, all right, I'm going to stop rambling and let you get right to your program.
All right. So yeah, just a real quick, one of the things a lot of people do with their photography is, Gary Mullins photography. When I started, there was a process that was real intentional in that I wanted to be more expansive than just my name. And then also when I shot back in my 20s, it became my identity, and that wasn't a healthy thing for me. So I've been very intentional about saying Gary Mullins photography instead of actually labeling myself as a photographer. That's not who I am. I'm a husband, father, a grandfather, and photography is something I produce. So that's kind of why I went with more of a studio name versus something that was maybe more traditional. So that's the logo I've created. So tonight I just thought about talking a little bit about the power of practice. It's something I learned in my early 30s when I was competing on a professional level in freestyle whitewater kayaking. And actually I've implemented that across a lot of other platforms that have been really beneficial. So just a really quick, everybody knows what practice is, right? I mean, there's jokes out there and Saturday Night Live skits, but practice, there's a little bit of a difference between practice and deliberate practice. Practice can just be going and shooting 1,000 free throws, and you may get good at a bad technique. And inevitably, you don't master that skill. You don't become the most efficient and reach your potential. So something I really learned pretty early on was deliberate practice. And I looked up a couple of things. There's not a definition per se, but a couple of concepts and ideas. Deliberate practice refers to specific types of practice that is purposeful and systematic. Systematic plays really well into my mindset. I've got a degree in mechanical engineering, and so that helps me out quite a bit. And then it's also just another thought. It says engagement in structured activities created specifically to improve performance in a domain. And so for me, in those areas, I break those down pretty minute when I am actually going out to shoot. So a couple of things in order to change our behavior, our skill set. I mean, we'll kind of go through some of these and show some examples of how that kind of has benefited me over the last couple of years. But, one is you got to be aware of what's going on. And the key part of being aware is just being transparent. I do a lot of men's ministry work now, and we talk about transparency, and it is oftentimes difficult for me to be transparent and admit things. Two, that we have to have a desire. We have to have clear definitions of what's enticing to us. I'm not real stoked on bugs, so I don't go do a lot of bug photography. I love some images I see, but it's just not very enticing to me. And then action. I think probably everyone's heard of SMART goals at some point, but we need to make them measurable and obtainable. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the results should be gratifying. And what is that? How does that result benefit the cycle of doing this over again? There's actually some theory when you look at deliberate practice. So there's a lot of information on the web about deliberate practice and different philosophies and theories, but they all kind of follow with a similar pattern. There's actually a theory that once you start something and you'll have this parabolic, growth, and then you'll kind of plateau, that once it becomes muscle memory and repetitive, you start declining in your skill set because there's no more challenge in it. And so that's what deliberate practice does, is it maintains that challenge to keep that curve going up versus kind of plateauing and kind of moving down. So I thought that was interesting when I was doing some research. So just those first couple of topics, awareness, a couple of key things in awareness. You got to be honest about your weaknesses. So for me, although I've competed at a national level at a sport, I am not very athletic. I don't do really great things to my left. I miss more shots going to my left than I do going to my right. And so knowing those intricate things about yourself is really important, because then you can set yourself up for better results. evaluate and take responsibility. So one of the things that's unique about me in the wildlife photography realm is, and might be the only person in this chat, is I shoot with Pentax. And I choose to do that. I've been a Pentax fan for a long time. I'm familiar with the menu. I love the image quality. And I know that's also a weakness in my setup, that the autofocus and the frames per second aren't as high, especially as some of these newer mirrorless cameras. So I choose to do that. I could take different approaches, but I choose to do that. So I evaluate those things, take on the responsibility, so that later on down the road, I can actually change something versus it kind of being mandated to me. And then be open to feedback. Awareness is huge. I live my life this way, but I also do that with photography. I have several friends that kind of give me feedback on my photography on a fairly consistent basis. So I thought I'd show a couple images, before and afters, maybe, of kind of what it looks like. So this top image was taken early on. I thought it was a great image. And being aware of how poor that image is, and it helped me to get to the image down on the far right. Now, I also was open to feedback. Some people were telling me, bird against the blue sky, anyone can do that. Well, that's hard to hear initially. And it was beneficial in the moment, because then I was able to frame this image against not just the sky, but also the Olympic Peninsula behind the bird, which gives it a lot more interest and definitely tells a better story. So this image, these two images, the monotone doe was actually taken on that trip at Bosque de Apache. And although not a bad image, it's sharp. It's got some decent bokeh. I'm shooting down on the image. I didn't really frame it very well. There's too much empty negative space. And just knowing that and evaluating that, being aware of that, had led me to this image last fall. We had some smoke in the background. The deer, for some reason, had this really rich orange color. And I was able to get, sorry about that. I was able to get below the deer and, create some bokeh on the front end and on the back, and create a much more intimate image. Again, similar, just an awareness issue. The deer on the left, the background's not very good. You can't see both ears. You can't see both eyes. It's not very engaging. You don't see the definition in the antlers. Until last year, when I went out, specifically that evening, I went out to shoot one location at a local wildlife refuge because of the sunset. And so being intentional and about that was very beneficial. Oh, so this also, this was the first, the bird on the left was one of the first songbird images I took. And that was probably right of the winter 2020, right after I met you, Linda. Out my back window, I set up a little perch. I tried to do, everything right. I'm shooting down on the bird. Unfortunately, I had someone tell me it was a good image. But after evaluating, realizing, just a year later, really just a year later, I was able to take this image of the female robin and back in East Tennessee, where on my parents' farm, being much more intentional about setting up all the parameters. So just being aware of what I was trying to do. I was so excited there was a bird that landed in my backyard versus, I waited for the bird to land on this specific perch. I already had the background, designed, and the light was coming in. So that awareness piece was really, really big there. Again, the image on the left it's not a bad image. It's over processed. So there's even awareness in that. Again, I'm above the animal. I didn't take the time to get out and get below the animal. So being able to evaluate that, I don't think I've ever posted that image because there was always something that didn't sit right with me with it. And luckily this summer I was with a friend, one of the gentlemen actually, we give each other feedback. And was able to capture this image of this bison in this beautiful backlight in the Tetons. So same subject, totally different feel. Actually, a lot of it's similar. I was low on both of the images, but I wasn't intentional about the background. The image on the left just happened to happen when I was with a friend near his house doing some fishing. The image on the right, I actually went out that afternoon on an overcast afternoon specifically just to shoot goslings. And so that will move into more of the planning, but the awareness of just, yeah, there's something that's not happening with this image that I really wanted versus the image down on the left where it really isolates and gives a lot more contrast in the image. So over to desire, and this is something I think is really important, something I've actually been working on quite a bit lately just in my personal life. But one of the first keys to desire is determine whether you need to do something or you want to do something. I have found myself that when I feel like I need to do something, I actually have less motivation, and there's actually shame involved with it. And it's not intentional, but there's an insinuation that if you need to do something, then there's something wrong with what you are doing. So I've really worked on trying to transition to what do I want to do, and what do I want to photograph? Where do I want to go? And it's not I need to go there to get this type of image for a portfolio. And I'm hoping that shows in my images that there's an enjoyment and a engagement there. That's not just a check the box or try to make $1 on a print, but actually going after something I want. I want to have these experiences with these animals. Just like the gosling before, I chose to go out that afternoon and just look for goslings. That was it. Luckily we have, a couple of there close to the house. The other thing is, creating realistic and tangible goals. So one of the things I do when I go out is I don't go out necessarily expecting as a goal to get a print quality image on a trip. My goal is to put myself in a position to capture an image that I've already pre-thought of and visualized in my head. I'm in control of that. I'm not in control of the aspect of whether the animal shows up or doesn't, what necessarily the environmental situation is. So that's a realistic goal, and I can come home and evaluate, did I do everything I needed to in order to get myself in that position? And versus beating myself up that I didn't capture the image that I wanted, or someone else has a better image or whatever, but did I do whatever I could to get myself in that situation? Then I can change that goal moving down if I'm able to measure that. The other big thing that I've been teaching this to my staff in ministry for a long time, but moving from what and how to why. I'm sure we've all heard of the show, How It's Made on one of the channels. Mm-hmm. And it's a decent show. I occasionally watch it if there's nothing on, but I know there's a show out now that's called something that made the food that made America. So there's a why behind it. I think it has a lot more grit to it. So I love this quote from Simon, and I'm not sure I was pronouncing his last name. I'm terrible with that. But it says, people don't buy what you do, or people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. And so moving into that why, and the what and how are important, but getting to the core piece of that, I think really translates to people and connects to people. Like Linda, what you're doing is trying to connect people. Well, we don't care how you do it. We don't care about the technology behind it. We just want to know the why, and then get in there with you in the why. And so that for me, the why is to protect, teach, and inspire. That's why I do. That's pretty much why I live. But I have found that to be really true in my photography. A friend of mine recently, I should have put this in the presentation. It just hit me now. I actually got a chance to take them up to Mount Evans to look at mountain goats recently. And she sent me a text of the image she took on her phone versus the image that I took that's at the end of this presentation. And she said the image I took and the image I wanted to take. And it was special to me that she was able to recognize that. And so my next goal for her is the image I wanted to take, the image I wish I took, and the image I did take, and where she has pride in that image that she did take. So that's why there's a thing called the golden circle that I don't know if you guys have ever seen before, but I think it's really important. And this goes with everything we do in life, and how we can kind of convey and connect and communicate what we're doing, and how we're doing it, and then ultimately why we're doing it. I often challenge my staff. I did youth ministry for 20 years, and I actually often challenge my staff, start with the why. And if you have to go to what, you can, but start with the why, and see how much more you will end up connecting with people. So the desire. So image on the left, there was a bunch of planning. There was some awareness in that image. And I like the image. I think that the osprey has a cool look, but I really wanted an image of a bird in flight that tells a story. And so this was the image on the right was a year in the making, and multiple trips to the same location, and adjusting for my equipment. At the time, I have been blessed to be able to have a 600 millimeter lens, but it was actually out being repaired. And so I only had a smaller telephoto lens. So I had to adjust my angle of approach, which I knew I wouldn't have as many opportunities with the light. Because I did that, I was able to capture this image with not very much crop. And so the desire there was to capture a bird in flight more than just a long distance, environmental shot, but something that really kind of pulled you in. Canadian geese. I love photographing them. I think they're beautiful. I love to watch their patterns, but the desire was to create motion. And I'd gone to this place in the park multiple times, and with the intention to practice how to do that. And after a couple of times in the park, capturing a lot of images like the one up in the upper right with nice light and, wing positions that are different, I decided I would try some intentional camera movement with the image down on the right. And when I got home and was able to pull that image out, I was so excited about capturing the wing positions. They're relatively sharp, the really nice bokeh and streaking in the background that really creates that motion from left to right. So the desire again was to create motion in this image, and just learning a different technique, practicing that technique a ton, yielded me one, maybe two good images. But there was a real intentionality about practicing that. So this is a resident Greyhorn Owl here in the Denver metro area that I was lucky enough a friend told me about. And when I first showed up, my desire was just to get a picture of an owl, to be that close. And so that was one of the first images I got, was the upper left. And it just really is not that great. It's pretty flat. It doesn't really tell much of a story. And as I started going back, so this was at the very beginning of the pandemic. So I had a lot of time on my hands. I work in a school district. We were remote, and I was working every other week at the time in the building. So I started really playing with composition, and I wanted something that was piercing. My desire was to get an image with all three, the mom and the two, they were actually getting ready to be fledglings at that point, get them in the nest and really hone into something that was really captivating, that kind of that communicated the family dynamic. And so one night there was some cloud cover, and I got some reflective light that was able to really give me some dynamic light into this little tree swallow. So the image up on the upper left, I had gone to Rocky Mountain National Park. This was early on. I think this was actually before I met you, Linda, that image was. and my father was with me, and the goal was really, the desire was just to see elk, show him elk. And I got home, and that was the best image I got. But last summer, not this past summer, the summer before, I was in Rocky Mountain National Park the second half of the summer, probably 4 days out of every week, really scouting, looking, and planning. And the desire was to get a really nice portrait image of a bull elk that wasn't the specifically the rut, the bugling, but just something that was nice and tranquil. And one night I saw the elk. I knew where they were moving because I'd been there so much. And Rocky Mountain National Park, if you haven't heard, they have eliminated individuals being out in the field during the rut. So you cannot be out in the fields during the daylight. And so some of the images you're seeing on Instagram from years ago, that's really how those guys are getting those images. They're out in the fields, and they're, 30, 40 yards away from rutting elk. So I was able to get really close to the tree line. So I was within the bounds and staying within the parameters of the park's request, and just waited. And finally this bull came, this direction, came a little bit up. You can see the grass there, came up a little bit the hill. So he wasn't hidden totally by the grass. And then another bull came out, which caught his attention, and he perked up and looked over, and I was able to capture several images at that point. So again, with a lot of awareness. So I was just excited to see some rams, and this was this week everything shut down. I was in the Tetons, and it shut down overnight. And I didn't take my time to really to work on composition. Compared to the image on the lower right, here in Colorado, there's an area that you can go in October where the rams are actually going to start rutting, and it's a couple mile hike in, or you can ride your bike. And so I was actually with a friend. He wanted to go do some wildlife photography, so I kind of took him out and was teaching him some things. And this image presented itself, but it took some work to get it. Really positioning myself, really getting myself in a place where I could get the animal in good light, because we're in a canyon in this situation. And so I really wanted some nice light, which was difficult, and a good close-up headshot of this animal. That ram is not cropped at all. So, I was able to get in a position that gave me that opportunity. This is, as far as desire, again, the moose in the upper left was in during the pandemic timing, right at the beginning of it. I think I was one of the few people in the Tetons at the time. It happened to be during our spring break at school. And so, I was just wanting to get an environmental type portrait of giving some perspective of what the moose look like during that season. And then that 2 summers ago, the 2020 summer, again, in the Rocky Mountain National Park, I came across the moose on the right. And the interesting thing about this, I'd already been with the moose for about 15 or 20 minutes. There was a huge crowd because it was right in a parking lot. And the moose started walking through this lake, which was really shallow. I could not get to be in front of the moose. There was no way I could traverse fast enough to get in front, to get a nice headshot, to get a shot of him coming my way. I wasn't familiar with the lake. I hadn't spent time there. So I ended up just deciding to hunker down. As much as I don't like butt shots, I hunkered down and see what he would give me. And I think if you go to my Instagram feed, I think this is my most liked image. And there's just something about it that people really resonate with, being low, getting eye level. And although it's a butt shot, that's not the focal point. And it's actually one of my favorite images from that summer. But the desire was to get an environmental portrait. And I had to realize that I couldn't get to a position I thought was going to be the best. I had to just kind of take what I could make at the moment. I actually ruined a camera battery on this one because I forgot I had it in my pocket, but I sat in the water and was able to capture that image. So the third part is action. So, and we can talk a little bit about what I actually do to practice, but a couple of keys here is, plan and visualize the execution. That's not something I really knew early on, especially when I went down to Bosque. I was just going to Bosque with a fairly big lens and had no idea what I was doing. And I really didn't come home with very many good images from that, even though I took a ton of them. And I have learned over the last 2 years to really make a plan. What am I going after? And then I want to visualize the execution of that. I go with dreams of images that I want. And sometimes that brings up disappointment, but oftentimes it can materialize really getting myself in that position. Back to the goal, I want to get myself in the position to take the image. So if I can visualize it, then I can have a better opportunity of actually getting into that position. Something I know for myself is if I make the first step a low-hanging fruit, I'm more likely to finish out. So if my camera is already packed, the tripod's on the bag, when I get home from work, my clothes are laid out next to the camera bag, I'm much more likely to grab that and go versus have to pack it when I get home after a hard day with a bunch of high schoolers that are crazy. It's much more likely if it's a low-hanging fruit, I'll actually get in my vehicle and go pursue some wildlife or a landscape opportunity. So that first step is low-hanging fruit, make it accessible, and that will make huge dividends on whether you actually execute your plan or not. The other thing is, for me, is involve other like-minded people, like in this chat. I tend to find that I get better images when I'm shooting with people, not necessarily side by side, or we're even communicating or talking, or even within the same visual range. But when I'm out there and there's something about connecting with others that helps me produce, better images. And so, get with like-minded people. Now, I will tell you this, I've been a bit disenchanted with wildlife photography community in general, because we're not all like-minded. And there's a lot of people that harass animals that, in National Park this summer, I'm sitting and some guy's calling a bear. The bear's 50 feet from us. Why are you trying to call the bear? And so, I ended up, instead of creating some tension, just got up and moved, got away from him, and got into a place where I could continue to produce good images, but not be in a place of frustration. I think that comes out in our work when we do that. And then the big hard thing when we are with other people is stay focused and on the desired outcome. I don't know how many times I've gone to say, I'm going to go shoot bald eagles this weekend. And I get up there and there's a muskrat, and all of a sudden I'm chasing a muskrat and never got anything. And then the eagle had 20 fish in its talons, So staying focused on what the goal is and on the desired outcome. That's something that's been really big for me over this past summer. I really made some really big steps in making plans and going after specific things. So just the action. The first image was one of my first trips out to Rocky Mountain Wildlife Refuge here in the Denver area. We're blessed to have that right in the middle of the city. We have whitetail, we have mule deer, we have bison, we have coyotes, we have bald eagles. We have the black-footed ferret, which is one of the most endangered mammals in North America. We have badgers. We have a plethora of animals. I was just excited to see a doe and her fawn just with engaging. Again, with, planning, visualizing, evaluating my previous image, I was able to capture an image on the right. And it's still not a print quality image. It's not something I'm going to put in my portfolio, but the intention was there and able to get this intimate pose of these two deer, that tells much more of a story and is more visually impacting. Again, just walking around with a long lens, dragonflies, shoot, whatever. Versus a couple weeks ago, I was out trying to photograph snowy egrets, and the action was really slow. And so I was really in tune and intentional about watching this red dragonfly, and it kept flying straight to this perch. So I made a plan. I lowered my angle. I took the camera down. I inched closer. I visualized, so the secret to this image is the water's not green. It's not a green background. It is water, but it's right next to the interstate, and there's a sign reflecting in the water. And I was able to position myself in order to get that reflection clean enough that it looks like it's a green background. So making all those plans, visualizing that, and being able to execute it was beneficial. So sage grouse, that's very threatened species here in North America. One of the more sought after grouse species to photograph for sure. The image on the upper left is the Tetons. They just happened to be on the side of the road. There was no plan, nothing. It was just desire to get an image. That was the only thing. The image on the lower right was a weekend trip planned to go specifically to a lek to get images of lekking sage grouse. I really like this image. I actually haven't edited the images from this trip really. I think I actually have some that may be a little better with the air sacs out. But the interesting thing about this image is I work with a young man. Until he met me, he had never seen a bison. He had never looked through binoculars. He had never seen a bald eagle. He had never had trout. He had obviously never seen a sage grouse. He'd never seen a moose. He really had never been outside of the Denver city limit or the Denver metro area. And he one day said, I want to go with you. I want to go experience what you experience. So we loaded up and turned his car into a little camper van like mine is. And we went out for a weekend excursion. And I think this image, maybe it's me that I have so much energy and compassion with the image because of the experience, but I think it does convey more of an intimate detail than obviously the one up on the left. And so he got to experience a lot of things on that weekend that a lot of people that do photography will never experience, and so I was able to share that with him, and it has really been a special experience between the two of us. So this next image, there was actually planning on both images. The image on the upper left was taken with a 7200. So I went early in the morning, late in the rocks when it was like snowing in Denver. And it was one of the first excursions out to get an image. So there was a plan there, but there wasn't a plan to get a specific type of image. It was just to get some images of waterfowl. And I knew, bokeh and stuff would be important. This image on the right of the common merganser, over the summer, something I'd been really wanting to get as a really nice, smooth image of a merganser. And I was coming off of looking for some grizzlies. It was a beautiful morning on Yellowstone Lake, and I saw this merganser, and it was coming down the coast of the lake, scurrying for fish, and it was coming out of shadow into light. And so I went about a quarter mile upstream, down the shore of the bird, and got out with the big lens in a beanbag and laid on the ground and waited for the bird to come to me. So planning, knowing what the image I already wanted. I wanted something with a real smooth foreground. I wanted the bird to come across, from left to right. I wanted something in the background that kind of gave it some depth. And so that plan, that visualization of getting that out there and doing that yielded this plus a couple more images. That's actually something I really enjoyed from the summer. And it's fun. It's fun when you put a plan together and actually comes together. I don't know, that doesn't happen in my work every day dealing with teenagers. So it's kind of nice. Again, similar thing, just, I was in Rocky Mountain National Park on the image on the upper left looking for anything to photograph. I happened to drive by this marmot, and he was sitting on a rock, and I turned around and was able to photograph out of the van window, versus going to a specific location where I know there's marmots. I know they're pretty habituated. I know the light's good that time of day in that location. and was able to, get this really intimate, like close-up headshot of a marmot. So just the planning piece of more, not just about the wildlife and doing the research there, but the location, the light, really makes a huge difference getting those images. So these images were actually taken on the same day, but it's that transition of quick planning. So this boar was actually pursuing a female, so he's fairly close to the road. So we were safe with our vehicles, and there was a large crowd photographing this bear. And I was just excited to get an image of a bear in the snow in late May, a boar at that. And the upper left image, I like it. It's fun. But I really, after I captured a couple images, I really wanted something that was a little more intimate. I actually wanted something soft, not something too like big and scary. I just kind of wanted something soft. So I loved the look on his face, and I was able to position myself, get around to where he was looking. I got a front shot versus that, great butt shot that maybe that's what I'll be known for, is butt shots. But getting that image with the snow falling, and luckily there wasn't a whole lot I could do necessarily about it, specifically over the eye, but not having a flake over the eye, still capturing that eye. But just that small shift in planning and taking that action was really big. Also with, getting feedback, especially when you're shooting in a crowd, if you don't even know any people, just taking cues from the crowd. So the way I found these bears, this was the second night I'd ever had an opportunity to photograph grizzlies. And this was the May of 2020. I'd found the grizzlies the night before. There was only a handful of people there. I didn't know anybody. I didn't really know where I was going. I knew the area well, but I didn't know where the bears were. I didn't know their habits. And so I just chose to go back to the same place the night before. And I noticed people were kind of like randomly parked on the side of the road here or there. And so I just sat and I took feedback from the people around me, because as soon as they moved, I moved. And I was able to get in a position to take. So even getting feedback on angles and locations and where the light's coming, just without even having communication, maybe not even knowing the person, but being aware of your surroundings can really benefit, what images you capture. So we're lucky to have ravens here in Colorado. I actually love ravens. I think they're beautiful, very intelligent birds. Image on the upper left was really early on. It was a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. It just happened to be where I was, and I captured that image. Versus the image on the right was I'd gotten done shooting sunrise, and there was still some low light. It wasn't too late in the morning, and so I specifically went and looked for ravens, and was able to sit with a raven and get this image where the wind was blowing the feathers to give it some kind of interesting aspect, and then get an image where the eye is exposed and super sharp, which helps lead you into that photo as well. So just that plan of going specifically for the ravens versus it just happened to be there. And this is, both of these again had plans. I had gone to shoot birds, and hopefully birds in flight locally. And but unfortunately, I was shooting seagulls and Canada geese and habituated ducks and anything else that was flying. And so I ended up with image on the upper left, beautiful color, nice light, but not really that interesting. Versus one morning, I went to another different pond, and I was just shooting seagulls, period. I didn't shoot any ducks. I didn't shoot anything else that came my way. There's a kingfisher that comes there pretty often. I didn't shoot that. I just was trying to shoot seagulls in flight, and with the intentionality to practice birds in flight. Seagulls are very fast when they dive, and trying to get to that point where when I got an opportunity to shoot bald eagles in the next coming months from that image, that I would be more prepped and better. So you can see this bird is coming from right to left, which is not my best skill set. It's usually, moving to the right's better, but I was able to position myself. I followed this bird for his whole duration of his cycle of fishing, and was able to capture that image. So results, we got several more images to go through, kind of more more portfolio type images. You know, for me, this is something I struggle with, having realistic expectations. I think when I met you, Linda, I'd seen some images of the X-wing sandhill cranes, and I went going, I'm going to get that image. You know, and that's not a realistic expectation with a 450 millimeter lens. You know, it's just not really. So really having realistic expectations, both with my skill level, my equipment, and the amount of time I'm there. You know, if I'm going to be in the Tetons for 2 weeks, I expect to get a portfolio quality image of a bear. Like, and that's realistic if I go up in May, because they're really active. But if I'm only going to be there for a weekend, like, that's not realistic. It may be more of a scouting trip. It may just be focused on landscape, something that's a little more, you know, predictable. But having realistic expectations is really important when you're trying to achieve specific goals. And then objectively evaluate the outcomes. So, you know, not so much the images, although we're in control of our images. And is the exposure right? Is the focus good? Is the aperture okay? Should I have used a larger aperture, get a little more depth of field? Should I, you know, all those things are important. But really those goals, those that we set, that did I get myself in position? Did I miss a shot because I didn't practice enough, or I got sidetracked on the long-tailed weasel and here comes a bobcat? Or really evaluating those things so we can actually sharpen and move forward. That's where that deliberate practice comes in. If we were just going to practice, well, I can just go shoot anything, right? And I might get a little bit better here and there, but I'm not going to get as good with birds in flight if I don't go specifically and be deliberate about practicing those specific things. So, you know, objectively evaluating, not subjectively. I can be my hardest critic oftentimes, but getting some objective evaluation, and then creating feedback loop from others in the results is really big. Some of the images I put up on Instagram, I think this is just a filler. It's kind of like, I just want to get some, you know, just something out from a trip or whatever, and people end up loving it. And I'm like, you know, I'm surprised. So, but getting some feedback loop, whether it be your social media or friends or a forum like this, is really beneficial. I've got one gentleman, we have given each other permission to be very, very critical with our work if we put stuff up on Instagram that's not worthy of our feed. And that's been really beneficial. So it makes me think about things when I put it up and kind of get more to an objective place versus a subjective place. So these are some images that kind of all those things kind of came together. This silhouette of a white tail was an image I wanted. I visualized it. I had planned several mornings to go do this. And I saw this deer coming over the rise, and I was able to get in a position right as the sun was coming up. I mean, if it would have been another 2 minutes, the sun would have been right behind him. So that yellow glow. So all that kind of stuff came together, and I can objectively look and say, I did my work. I did my practice. I knew where the sun was. I knew, you know, some trails that the animals were traveling, and I put myself in a position in order to actually get that image. So again, this image, again, trying to do birds in flight. That day, bald eagles was slow activity, so I transitioned from bald eagles to American white pelicans, and this guy came right across, right in front of me. And because I had been practicing, I was able to nail the focus, nail a good wing position, great light. And this is an image I'm really proud of. Something if it has any crop, it's very little. So it's a full frame image that you know, really culminated all those four things. Again, grizzly bear. This is 3 days of being with the same bear morning and night. Just learning her behavior, her patterns, making a plan. You know, there were people that were constantly backing up, probably getting a lot of profile shots. And, you know, I just kind of went back and waited for her to come to me. I knew she was comfortable around the road where she was, but she wasn't going to come too close. So I had made an assumption she was going to come across this little rise, and sure enough, she did. And I was able to capture. If you follow anything on Instagram around Felicia, this is Felicia from this summer that there was a lot of controversy about. And so it's an image from the summer that I really, really enjoy. Bison, kind of a fine art portrait of a bison. Went out specifically for this image on a misty Colorado morning that had just been some fresh snow. Yeah, and I had visualized this image, for multiple months, trying to get this image, and was able to get this image with a decent telephoto lens. I wasn't that close to the animal, but really wanted just to kind of focus in on the eye nice and sharp and kind of give the story of the color. This is the result of both the feedback of blue sky images, and so also working with birds in flight. So Pentax, with my autofocus system, it loses focus pretty easily. So tracking birds across a clustered background is tough. So blue sky images give me a little better result. But this night there happened to be a cloud, and I was able to kind of get some color in there that kind of helps tell more of a story, and able to kind of also capture this image right before he pitched to go down to sweep. So awareness, I'm probably not going to get the dive shot right now, because I'm going to lose focus. My skill set's not good enough. My equipment that's not its strong point. So I captured that moment right before he went down. That gives us a little more intensity in the image versus just the soaring image. Yeah, so moose, elk, big ungulates. The image on the left, very planned. I had envisioned this image ever since I found this bull elk, and I was going back night after night, and sometimes I'd see him, sometimes I wouldn't. And luckily one night I stopped and kind of stood up on my van, and I saw him coming up and was able just to get in a position. I was the only person there, and he came up over the rise and kind of stopped and gave me a nice glance. The background was really important in this image. That's the Flatirons here in Colorado, just outside of Boulder. So they're very iconic. People know it's in this area. As soon as you see that, that's the Flatirons, even though you don't see the whole deal. So that was a very planned image. Time after time going back to check him out. Image on the right, they call him Captain Hook because of that hook that's out on front. Again, the same moose as the butt shot from earlier. And this time I had a little more flexibility with getting in a position, and I was really hoping to get him with some water coming off his antlers or something coming out of his mouth to give it kind of the story that he's feeding. Yeah, but there was a plan. This is one of those things. I took feedback from people around me. I saw some people I knew that were local wildlife photographers, and they took off. But I stayed put, knowing that if they found him, the crowd would migrate, and I didn't know where he was going to come out. And luckily he came out right in front of me in the parking lot. But just being aware of that and listening and being cues, I was able to get feedback in the moment of where to position. Again, some more bison shots. The one on the left, I was really working on bokeh that day, really trying to work on getting creamy bokeh. So being intentional about having the subject and the background separated was what I was focused on that day. And so that was taken with the 600, which is a little easier to do that. But I really have enjoyed that image as well. The one on the right was actually taken with the 450. And it was just a beautiful opportunity. I'd gone out early that morning to find some bison to photograph as well. You can tell I like bison. I think I found that love when I was in Yellowstone the first couple of years, and being in bison jams and just being entrenched with bison. I really love bison. Just this image again, low, being planned. It was snowing that morning, so I went out. I wanted some kind of frosty bison, something that kind of told the story of the plains and that. So just the whole intentionality behind that, awareness of the conditions was big, knowing that it was snow and that I would have to probably have something fairly close in order to get some kind of render some sharp focus with all the snow that was coming down. We had a pretty light snow, but it was a lot. So really happy with the results. So I got myself in the right position and framed everything, well. Not your traditional left to right, but more from the right to left. So these are the foxes. Linda helped me with this a little bit. Had an opportunity to go up to photograph these guys, and and had to make a lot of plans. It's not easy to stay on the island where they're at. I mean, it's not easy to get there necessarily. I mean, it's not hard, but you got to plan. And so I did quite a bit of research, asking Linda some information, asking some other folks I knew that had been there some information, really looking at Google Earth and light and where the light was going to be and when and how. And then I scouted the location when I first got there to see if I get a better understanding and perspective. Again, taking cues from, there was cars parked near this field. So there's probably something people are photographing. And I was the only one there that morning, I believe. I think someone showed up just a few minutes later. But I was able to get to watch these guys romp and play for, 20 or 30 minutes. And it was just a really magical moment watching them play and engage. And this is only one of probably 100 images that I could process if I had time in my life. But this is one of the ones I got out pretty quick just to kind of do a feed. I'm a little backlogged on editing. I'm assuming we probably all are at some. I can't stop shooting. So I shoot more than I edit, and that's not always a good ratio thing. These are a couple of images too that took a lot of planning, both with location. The one on the left is Upper Minnesota, Zach Sim Bog. If you guys haven't been there, it's absolutely amazing. I'll give you a little secret. Do not stay in the Hotel 6 in Duluth. So just don't do that. That was a big mistake on my part. But I went up specifically for great gray owls and did a lot of research, a lot of planning. Some of that planning went away real quick when there was a bunch of local drama and the kind of forum went away. But then I had enough base information, was able to capture some really nice images. And I went up specifically for, I was pretty sure I could get a perch image. I wasn't sure about flight images at the time. And so I really didn't, I got a couple flight images, but nothing that's really noteworthy. And so the next time the plan is to go up for flight images and particularly focus on that and put myself in positions for flight images. Now that I know the area and know the birds a little better. The image on the right with the coyote pouncing and mousing in the snow was a couple days in the making. They hunt a fence line pretty regularly during the spring of the year. And so I was able to wait until he got close enough and got a series of images where he was pouncing, getting as low as possible. And, so it took a lot of planning, a lot of visualization of that. So this is a recent image from the Pacific Northwest. Again, specifically going just for birds in flight. And I spent part of December, January, February, and some of March, almost every weekend here locally at a state park where we have a couple of resident bald eagles that are pretty predictable. And I think out of all those weekends, I might have one image that I would consider posting. Because I'm just not quick, and with some limitations in my equipment, it was really working on practicing on what makes the absolute best opportunity for me to capture images. And I'm so grateful I did all that deliberate practice time and time again, even though the results were somewhat not rewarding in that space, because now the end result is rewarding. And this is one of, again, maybe couple hundred images that I can edit. And it's just one I chose to edit here pretty quickly. Another bison image. This image wasn't so much planning. I wasn't coming specifically for this image, but by all the deliberate practice of knowing the light, knowing the location, being aware of where the herd was, kind of what time of year. When I came up on this image, this opportunity, I was able to capture this image pretty quickly before he decided to turn his head or move in a position where it just wasn't as appealing. I really like this image. It has that fine art look that I try to capture. And a lot of people always say, how did you paint that? Well, I wish I could paint that. Fortunately, I'm not that talented. Another osprey picture. Again, you know, going up time and time again, trying to render sharp images of birds in flight against murky backgrounds. So that was something that, you know, after practice and practice, I was able to capture this image with the eyes sharp and kind of looking my way, coming kind of diagonally through the frame. Wood duck, multiple times going to the same location, early in the morning, learning the light, really visualizing what I would like. Again, I would like to have a better reflection in this image, but I can't control that. I mean, I can't control the wind patterns or how much motion is in there, but I can control the height in which I shoot. I can control, you know, all those other technical aspects in order to capture this image. And I was happy with the results with the circumstances I had. So this is the kingfisher I was talking about earlier. So one evening I went out just to photograph the kingfisher, not even sure if he was going to be perched, but sure enough, he was perched and the light was nice. You know, when you blow it up, the image is really sharp and crisp around the eye. And so it's an image that I've worked really hard on over the winter, trying to work on predictability and, you know, timing and all those type of things, that really deliberate practice on that aspect of habitat awareness and species awareness to be able to capture, you know, this image. You guys might be aware, maybe follow some of the same people. The wild horses up in northwestern Colorado are getting rounded up right now. There's quite a bit of controversy around that. I think they're diminishing the herd from somewhere in the estimated of 850 to 900 to down to 150. So that's really big. So I was able to get there before they did this on my way back from a long trip this summer and capture this image. I was actually more scared of the wild horses than I was bears. I'm not familiar with them. I don't know their habits. They can be pretty aggressive. This was a stallion in a bachelor group that can be really unpredictable. And so, you know, I did the best with what I could, of getting in a position where I could stay safe and kind of have some cover, but still get, you know, some nice backlight image. Let's see, is there one more? It's sage grouse again. A lot of planning. This was not so much planning on the light and technical aspect in the species side. This was planning with a oil company that I worked with for a year to get access. And so I had to give them a plan, my desired outcome, you know, what in return I could provide for them. So again, back to my why, I want to protect, inspire, and teach. So they've actually used some of my images in their wildlife reports to, you know, federal regulations. So that's really powerful and special to me, that I'm able to kind of help with that conservation piece in that area. Again, you talked about the pika, and that was really planned. Went up specifically wanting to photograph pika. There's mountain goats all around me, bighorn sheep. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on, and I focused just on the pika. A moose in the field, up in the Tetons, a lot of rain. Again, knowing the habitat was really powerful. And then again, the mountain goat, knowing location, light. You know, this is more of a technical aspect with the white, because it's just a cloudy night. Like, we were in the clouds, so knowing exposure and being able to switch really quickly as the animal turned to the light. This double crested cormorant. Again, in the spring, I was going to a location trying to photograph there regularly, and was able to capture this image, you know, because of the continually deliberate practice and planning of what's going on. And this is a blue grouse, I believe, is the species. This was a little bit of a technical shot in the sense of I only had just a second in order to capture him against that black background. So that's all natural. That's not like, really, there's not a whole lot of editing this image at all. And it kind of just worked out really well that I was able to capture that side light that illuminated him with the natural background. Again, planning being with the bears over the summer, really wanting one of the cubs with an image of them standing up, kind of in a more, a precious moment versus an alerted moment. And so when this happened, I was able to capture it really quickly. Again, this image, I had to move from right to left, which is not my best skill set, but because I practiced that and been intentional, I was able to capture the focus. Again, the fox, this image was pretty difficult actually, because this little guy, I don't know, Linda, when you were there, he was awfully curious and he was not really scared, and he walked right up on me. So I had to like be intentional about getting the image, but not letting him get too close. And I mean, he was moving fast. So, getting that focus sharp was pretty difficult in the moment. So I'm glad I practiced all those things. Even birds in flight helped in that image specifically. And there's the money shot of the bear. Yeah, definitely some luck. A lot of planning went into that. Really grateful for all the time I've practiced moving up to that moment. So when this boar was coming at me, I was able to capture the image with him, looking my direction with the claws in the air. Again, no, I didn't take any snowflakes out of his eyes or anything. That's just natural, and was really beneficial. So that's kind of it for the presentation. There's how to find me if you're interested. If anybody wants to come to Colorado, let me know. I love it. I've got probably something except grizzlies and wolves. We have wolves, but they're kind of controversial right now and pretty sparse. But everything else, I have some good beta on and locations. So, yeah.
That was wonderful, Gary. All right, I'm going to get you to take down your screen. I saw just a couple of questions in the chat that I want to put in front of you. So if you guys have anything that you want to ask, this is a good time to stick them in the chat. You had mentioned, this is earlier on, a wildlife refuge, and I think it was in Denver. Was there a specific place, or were you referring to the Rocky Mountain National Park? There's some chat in the chat, so we're trying to figure out what that was.
It's the let me think. I've got a Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge. It is in the Northfield area. If you've ever flown into Denver, you've actually driven right past it. It's about 26 square miles of fenced habitat. The animals are wild. They're not managed. The bison are managed for population growth, but they're not managed other than that. It's literally right next to where there's a stadium called Dick's Stadium. That's where our soccer team plays. It shares a border. There's houses that are being developed right. I mean, you could buy a house and watch world record mule deer feed. And so, I mean, it's 15 minutes from my house. And so if I just need to get out because I've had a rough day, I can go out. Or if I have something I really want to work on, there's typically something there I can go after to work on. So if you ever come to Denver, I would highly encourage you to bookend or spend some time there. Any of this hunting magazines, any of the hunting stuff that you see with deer specifically mule deer, they're probably coming. A lot of times they're coming out of that area. In the week before Thanksgiving this year will be the rut, and there will be a heavy handful of professional wildlife photographers there capturing images, hoping for snow, hoping for some good action. But it's a real blessing to have, real blessing.
That's great. Bridget is saying stunning images, but she's curious about how you achieve such a low vantage point for your photos. Are you using a low tripod?
I'm actually using a beanbag most of the time. Sometimes I'll use a tripod without a center column. and get pretty low. The beanbag typically works most of the time. I do have a ground pod that I'll use sometimes that I just made out of a frying pan. I would assume everybody's seen those type of videos. With my 600, it's a little too heavy, and there's a little bit of flex in it, so it can create some shake if I'm not careful. But I love the beanbag because it's just so solid. I don't know where it's at. I'm trying to look at my front seat because I think I moved it. I made a rectangle beanbag with a synthetic bottom, and so I actually have 3 heights available in that beanbag because of 3 sides of the rectangle. So that's one of the things I use quite a bit. Is that beanbag gives me, and it varies just a little bit, but when you're talking about being that low, a couple inches can make a huge difference, whether having a stem of grass across the face of an animal versus having it across its shoulder. So
I don't see any other questions in the chat, so I'm gonna close you out. But before I do that, I've been doing a lot of practicing, and as I'm listening to you talk, Gary, I need to move to the next stage of being more deliberate. And you sent that message home tonight for me personally, because I think the phrase is spray and pray. And I definitely have gone through numerous SD cards, and I've got so much to edit. And I think if I could just get to that deliberate stage, I'll be a much better photographer. As you're going through your presentation, you hit on things that I've thought of, but I haven't applied. And I suspect that, there's a few people in here that are, there's more birders in this room, and wildlife photographers. Then I started going through the list, and I realized there's quite a few people in here that shoot wildlife. So I think your presentation will resonate with a lot of people. And I think that the time that you spent outlining and really underlying some ideas for us to practice on, it was just perfect. And I want to thank you for coming on and doing this for us. And I hope that you enjoyed it. And is there anything you want to say just to close out before I shut down your session?
I just really appreciate your time. I hate not seeing everybody. I love to connect. I'm very relational. Really humbled. It really filled my bucket. It's been a pretty hard restart of the school year. So this has been really special for me. So thank you for the feedback. And you can DM me on Instagram. I live my life with feedback. So if there's something that really resonated or something that I could do better, anything, I want to learn as much as I possibly can as well. And I'm constantly doing that. So your feedback is very valuable to me, yours and all the guests, now my new community. So
this is awesome. Okay, so let me close you out. And again, thank you for coming and being part of this little project. This was my COVID project of, I'm the same way. I need people around me. And when we went under, house arrest, as I call it, I really worried about how I was going to keep myself entertained. And I started this little project, and I really thought, I told, Aaron, I said, this will just last a couple of months. And here we are, a year and a half. And we've been blowing and going at this. I believe you're our 78th presentation. Crazy. It's crazy. And I love that people keep coming back. And, I very rarely say this to the people that join us, but I really do appreciate the feedback that I get on the speakers and the content. And actually, it's the community that we're creating. So I know that, you lead a very busy life, but we do this every Wednesday. So join us anytime you see a topic that interests you, because this is for everybody. Honestly, that's really my goal, is to connect people that are like-minded, that, sometimes we need that encouragement to get off the couch and get out with our cameras. So, all right, with that, thank you so much, Gary. I'm going to close you out. Guys, if you want to connect with Gary, you can find him on Instagram at Feather Lighting Studio. And I'm going to cross my fingers that he's going to find some time in his schedule to work on that website. So we'll have something else to look at, and eventually I'll be able to see that he set up some workshops. And when you do that, Gary, let me know if I miss it. Earlier this year, Elaine Cruden helped me get the Happiness Hour community blog up and operating. And we've added some fun and interesting articles that you can access through my website, lindanickell.com. If you have a story that you'd like to share, check out our invitation and submit your story through the link. Next week, John Fisher returns to the guest seat with a presentation called From Stars to Storms, Capturing the Beauty of Texas Skies. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.